it's not as if my truth is something I make up. It's knitted into my being because God made me a certain way.
Right.
It's my identity because I'm a person that God made, and He kind of got to pick all the
together in your mother's womb.
Pick all the default settings.
Hey everybody, welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, overwhelmed Christians who don't want to live in busy, overwhelmed land, and instead want to live in freedom and abundance and peace.
Yeah.
Because who doesn't want to live in freedom and abundance and peace?
Some people seem awfully determined to stay in stressed out zone.
This is true. I'm Liz Ferris, and this is my husband, Evan.
Hi there.
And we're so glad you guys are here with us today on this lovely Tuesday.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to the show. So we've been going through these 5 principles out of the Dr. May book. Well, we just started last week. We're in principle number 2, which is dignity. But last week we talked about honesty. Next week we're going to talk about community. And then we'll talk about responsibility and simplicity after that. So, but we're still looking through the lens of our 5 principles, the CSCs. Mm-hmm. And today we're on surrender. So yes. Dignity and surrender.
Yes. So I think when I was thinking about this, one of the biggest things that came to mind was surrendering to somebody else's perspective. Because, we've talked before about how you're always surrendered to something. Like, we can't not surrender.
It's kind of how humans work.
Right. Yes. So, sometimes I think we surrender to someone else's perspective on ourselves.
Besides God's?
Yeah.
Yeah, someone, or, I guess, because even if we're surrendered to our own idea about who we are, we still don't want to go down that path either. If we start making up.
We don't know ourselves.
Yeah.
We know ourselves, and we recommend that everyone, spends time getting to know themselves. But there's a certain element where we don't know ourselves. We don't know our full selves. We don't know our futures. We don't, we see everything through the lens of our past experiences, and it may or may not be true.
Yeah. And there's lots of other dangerous, like you were saying, those external ideas. If we grew up going to public school, you're constantly fed the big identity piece of where did I come from? That idea is evolution and just kind of total cosmic meaningless. It's just dirt nap after we're dead. And okay, that messes with you if you really think about it.
Yeah.
And if we start to accept that steals dignity big time.
Right, because you are just there by chance rather than being intricately, intentionally created by God.
Yeah. And, even if you believe that at some point, evolutionally, we came to a point where things like dignity and the common good and things like that made sense evolutionally. For our culture, it's still just kind of us making it up.
Right, yeah, rather than them having value in themselves. Yeah, like we talked about last week with failure, sometimes we get caught up in events that we then take on as an identity, whether that is something that we learned in school, like you were talking about, or something that, somebody told us. It can become this is who I am. Andrea Pennington has this great TED Talk on it about being yourself and how she grew up and her parents, well-meaningly, encouraged her to be a doctor. And, she learned like children were seen and not heard. And she loved to be on the stage. And they're like, don't be a poor, whatever.
A poor actor.
Right, a poor actress, and instead be a doctor. And so she started being a doctor. And then she started treating other people in her practice who were miserable and sick because they weren't living out their true selves. And she herself was pretty miserable too. And so she finally was like, wait a minute, what am I doing with my life? Yeah,
that's interesting. When we listen to that stuff and kind of fold to the pressure, we're giving those people so much control over our life.
Yeah, we are. And unfortunately, I think sometimes they're the people that we want to, we're hanging on to those things because we're bitter or because they were so painful. But it's only when we actually bring them into the light, say them out loud.
What things are you meaning?
Different identity things. Oh. So, like, if somebody said to you, you're never going to amount to anything.
Yeah.
And I think, Dr. May is talking about all of these in the context of addiction. And so I think you see that where we're just even sometimes getting addicted to our busyness, so we don't have time to think.
Yeah.
Because then we have that little voice in our head that's saying, you're never going to amount to anything. And, we get stuck in this like franticity where we're trying to prove that they're wrong and to ignore what they said instead of just stopping and bringing it into the light and saying, is this true? Mm-hmm. Is this not true? Because you're so afraid that it's true.
Yeah.
And so you're constantly running away from it. That's very tiring.
Yeah. I mean, especially when that message comes from an authority figure when we're young. It's like, why wouldn't it be true? They're the adult. They know what they're talking about.
Exactly.
But it can be way less malicious than that, though. Like with the Andrea Pennington story, I doubt her parents were like, you're worthless, go be a doctor.
Right.
It was like they were trying to take care of her.
Exactly.
And yet she still was able to eventually get to the point where it's like, this isn't really taking care of me. And I can't take care. I'm not the doctor I want to be. And so what we're looking for when we're trying to decide if these messages we've heard from other people are right or not is we're comparing them to what God says about us.
Right.
We're not just going to throw out what everybody else says about us and I'm just going to decide all on my own either. It gets tricky because there's different phrases like your truth or your be yourself or whatever, and we want to do that, but it's not as if my truth is something I make up. It's knitted into my being because God made me a certain way.
Right.
It's my identity because I'm a person that God made, and He kind of got to pick all the
together in your mother's womb.
Pick all the default settings and set me up,
Right. Yeah, it's amazing when you really stop to think about the fact that God orchestrated every cell, put us together, gave us our personality, and that He planned us before the creation of the world and then brought us into existence is just mind-boggling.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's stressful sometimes to shift into that much dignity and self-respect? I don't know, maybe, because we talked about this yesterday. People, I think, even the outwardly like proud people and like, oh, I'm so great. I think we all inside have like this questioning thing, like, am I really like good enough or special enough, or do people really care about me enough? And then to have God say, I love you this much, and it's like an atomic bomb of love, right? And to accept that is, I don't know, kind of intimidating, I guess, or overwhelming. But that's really where our dignity comes from. And I don't know, it's a task to try to accept that, but it's a lifelong thing we can work on.
Well, and that's why we're talking about it today on surrender, because it is a surrender. It is saying, okay, Lord, tell me who you say that I am, even if it's not necessarily what I'm ready to hear. And that's the only way that we can root our dignity and our worth in something that doesn't change.
Yeah.
Like, I think so often, going back to those things people have said, we either root our dignity in a past event or a future. Like, either we were like this, this is who you were, this is who you are, this is who you should be, and it's all based on like things that we did or things that we should do rather than who we are.
Yeah.
There's no be there.
Yeah. Real hard to be present because you got your head stuck in the past or your feet sticking out into the future. Yeah. And I think the other aspect of this is going to be once we've got locked in who I am in God's perspective, then I can treat other people with dignity and respect because I know that they are the same as me.
Right.
And none of
they're
them are
knitted together. They're created by God.
Yeah. None of them are worth any less or any more than me. whether I get to meet the president or that homeless guy in the street.
Yeah.
I don't know. We see through God's eyes, and it's like pretty amazing.
I know we talked yesterday about how our dignity is rooted in how God views us, and we'll probably say it again tomorrow and the rest of this week, but that's because we all need to hear it about 1,100,000 times.
Yeah, our perspective gets shifted off of that so easily, and we start to get caught up in a lie.
Right, and if we're not living with dignity, we're not living who we are.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about tomorrow when we talk about being centered. Thanks to everybody that's been listening. We really appreciate it. Thanks to the people that have been sharing the show. We also super appreciate that. If you have found this podcast helpful, please do continue to share it with people. We love you guys, and we are praying for you that you are finding greater freedom and abundance and peace, and that you're setting down those railroad tracks. All right, come back tomorrow and we'll talk about being centered and keep talking about dignity.
That's right. See you then.